Hey everybody, this is Vandweller, and today I thought it'd be fun to play some Super Turbos on full tilt. And for those of you who don't know or didn't read my thread in the general discussion forum, my account on full tilt and on PokerStars, they were recently hacked and drained. Like a guy hacked my email basically, and by getting control of my email, he was able to, access my poker accounts and so forth. And so he totally drained my full tilt account, and it was down to zero. But, well, lo and behold, I got a rakeback payment. So, so I have this like random $346.02 just kind of floating around in my full tilt account now. Happily, I was able to get a stake on PokerStars, where my name is not Vandweller, and I'm not going to tell you what it is. But so I have this $346 floating around, and I don't really plan on playing a lot, in the coming days on full tilt anymore. Although I was grinding the Super Turbos pretty hard. So I figure it would be fun to see if I can turn this 346 into something, and I'm going to do that by not respecting proper bankroll management at all, because this isn't really my bankroll. So I figure it'd be fun to go play some $15 Super Turbos and see if we can turn this 23 buy-ins into something else. And I'm going to open, I'm going to run them 4 at a time. And whoops, hold on there. Sit and go. Here we go. Sit and go. We're going to run them 4 at a time, tiled, and keep them running for about 45 minutes to an hour. And as I drop out of one, I'm going to get into another. Normally when I play, I'm going to start registering for these. I'm going to miss that one, aren't I? No, I got in. All right. Normally when I've been playing these, what I was doing was using full tilt shortcuts. And unfortunately, with the new updates they made, improvements, full tilt shortcuts no longer works, which is a real shame. But I'm going on the assumption that these, this will be valuable because eventually that software will work again. And here, let me whoops. Do I have my HUD running? I think so. So eventually, the full tilt shortcuts or poker shortcuts, whatever it's called now, will work again, and it will make these games worth, mega tabling. I think the Super Turbos are awesome. One of the big advantages to playing these is just the amount of volume that you can get in. Here, let me manage these. There's going to be a lot of, because I have to constantly open tables manually, there's going to be a lot of windows flying around, but hopefully that won't distract us from the action. One of the advantages to these is that you can massively multi-table them. And why can you do that? Well, because your decisions are basically binary, right? I'm either going all in or folding, or calling all in and folding, or folding. And so as opposed to normal, deeper stacked sit and goes, you do not have, all these post-flop decisions to make. And that means that there's fewer buttons just physically to press, right? I mean, like a normal sit and go, you're 1,500 chips and you raise to 90, and then I flat call, you see a flop, you have to decide to check or bet, or check call, check fold, blah blah blah. There might be a turn or a river to bet, and that's like 7 to 10 button clicks for one hand. Well, the Super Turbos, it's basically 1 button click per hand, right? So in terms of just the simplicity of the decisions that you have to make, there's just fewer overall to make, right? Just per hand. So you can totally massively multi-table them. And on full tilt, there's a limit of, you can only play up to 16 tables at once, which is a shame on, which is another kind of point in favor of PokerStars, but unfortunately PokerStars doesn't have Super Turbos, and I just love these. So now I'm stuck playing like 18 mans on PokerStars. So what's cool about these though is if you can physically handle the toll of, here, let me get rid of this now. If you can physically handle the toll of, fully 16 tabling these, using full tilt shortcuts to keep you in 16 constantly, you can play 50 of these an hour, right? And that's what I used to do. What I would do is I would set up full tilt shortcuts to have me stay in 16. So if it, if one I busted and I was only in 15, it would open another one to make it 16. And then I would set it, I would say, all right, stop opening tables at 50 tables. And so I would play them in like basically chunks of 50, continuously opening until I reach 50. And that would take almost exactly 1 hour. On average, these things last about 12 minutes, on average. But if you make it to the heads up, it'll probably be about 20 minutes overall. So, I mean, just imagine if you're like a low stakes grinder, right? If you can only afford to play, say, the 750s or the 15s, I mean, if you can play 15 hours, say you had 4 hours a day to dedicate to poker, right? Well, you can, I mean, you can pretty reliably get in, okay, I'm going to get in my 200 games, and that's very easy to do. You just play 4 1-hour sessions throughout the day, and that's what I would sort of do, or sometimes I'd play 250 or 300, depending on how ambitious I was feeling. And so, you think about that, say you're playing the 14s, right, and you're kind of on a low, relatively small, kind of low-stakes bankroll. If you can play 200 games in a day, that's $200 in rake, right, because the rake is $1. And we're not going to call the pair. Well, that pair. So you can get in $200 of rake, which is, if you have rake back on full tilt, is going to be about, well, it's going to be exactly $54 a day just in rake back, right? Regardless of even your table winnings. So if you're on kind of a low stakes kind of bankroll, or hell, even if it's like a part-time job or whatever, you're just getting started, I think it's a great way to just grind rake back if you can manage it. So the rakeback is really cool, and they run often enough, certainly up to the $28 level, 28 plus 2s. Certainly they run up to that level where you can, find yourself 4 or 5 sets of 50 of those running continuously all day. So, I mean, they're awesome just in terms of multi-tabling. Now, I can't promise I'm going to be able to discuss every decision if they come fast and furious, but hopefully you'll be able to just see what I'm doing, and if something more interesting comes up, which I hope something interesting comes up, because if it doesn't, and I lose all this money, then I can't really, and if I lose all, if I lose all of these, and then my 23 buy-ins goes away, then I can't really make a video, so I'm like totally screwed. So the advantage is why to play them is just you get in just so many of them, which is awesome. Obviously, show that. Another thing to say about the Super Turbos, because I don't think there actually is a Super Turbo video here on Deuces at all. Another great thing about the Super Turbos, nope, not today, is they're very good training ground if you're just sort of beginning in sit and goes, or in poker really, because if you can just get the push fold down, you can win at these, and if you're very bad at post flop play, then you can do it. The 6s are a close shove here, and we seem to have fairly reasonable players, so you can shove a pair of 6s, and I'll get into a way later how to estimate that. If you're not very good at post flop play, well, this demands very little post flop play, right? I mean, whenever there's actually a hand where there's any kind of significant post-flop decision, it's a surprise. Oh man, post-flop, So like 95% of hands, there's going to be no such decision like that. And apparently I lost with the 6s too. And with that, so let's open, let's get another one going. And 4-tabling these probably isn't, ideal, but, what the hell. Move that out of the way. And 40 chips, may as well. What was I saying? Oh yeah, so it's just a great training ground. If you're not very good at post-flop play, let's retile those. And if you're not very good at post-flop play, then these things don't reward that, so that's not even an issue for you. There's a couple of misconceptions about these things too, or at least a way of understanding them that isn't fully valid. You know, you'll hear if you read forums on these, you say, "Oh, these things are incredibly swingy. They're just so the variance is hell," which I think is somewhat of a misconception. Like, everything else being equal, the variance is not any different than normal sit and goes. You know, with a 1500 chip stack and whatever. Everything else being equal, and of course everything else is not equal. We're gonna kicker plays. Oh wait, no, it doesn't. 160. I suppose I should concentrate once in a while and try to make a decent decision. The variance in these is not different in the way that the structure of these does not make the variance different. Right? There's nothing in the payout structure that means that super turbos are inherently more swingy than other forms of sit and go, right? We chop again. I'm Mr. Chop. There's nothing inherent in the payout structure at all. I mean, it's 50 for 50% of the prize pool for first. It's 30 for second and 20 for third. So there's nothing. I mean, assuming you could have the same. What am I doing? Nope. Assuming you could have the same finish distribution in, let's say you were playing, at an appropriate level, like if there were a $15 regular sit and go. I'm just going to take on the blind here. I don't have fold equity, so no one's folding, and my hand sucks, even though my equity in the tournament is really bad. There's no value in that. Fairly tight players here. 3.5 blinds. I'd shove with any two. I would have shoved the Jack 9 if it had been folded to me. There's nothing inherent in these that means the variance is more, right? Variance is really a function of the payout structure, in essence, right? The standard I'm not going to get into all that stuff, but standard deviation in these things, for any 50, 30, 20 payout single table that's 9-handed is going to be like roughly 1.6 buy-ins, and it's going to be slightly more, yeah, for a 10-handed structure, but it does remain. So there's nothing inherent in these that means there's more variance. But so what is it? Here, we can do that. So why is there the illusion that they're swingier? Well, they are swingier, but it doesn't have anything to do with the fact that people say, oh, they're swinging because there's so many donks. Well, that's not really what it is. It has to do with the fact that your edge overall is lower. Win rates are lower, right? Everything else being equal at, can I get a spade? Not today. All right, let me try to get in some more. This is fast and furious. Win rates are lower at these, and why is that? Well, here. Oh, look at that. Why are win rates lower? Well, I mean, let's say that just as, being you, the sit and go player, you have sort of a natural, sorry about all this bouncing table, but, it's kind of what we have to do here. All right. That there's if you have sort of like a natural skill advantage over your opponents at every level of sit and go that you play, the more hands that you get to play in any given tournament, the more that your natural skill advantage has an opportunity to express itself in dollar terms. Let's see, where am I? This is close. I could shove this. In fact, I think that I'm going. I'm going to fold it for now. Just because I'm tied in equity with all these other people. If I were significant, and we're going to get into this, hopefully. If the more that hands you get to play in any given tournament, the more that your natural skill advantage has the opportunity to sort of express itself in dollar terms, right? Like, say there was a sit and go that started with a million chips, and the blind started out as one chip, two chip, right? I mean, in the context of any given tournament, generally speaking, the players with the best skill are going to do, significantly well, right? In that kind of format. Because every single hand that you play with an advantage, did I register to another one? I meant to. All right, here we go. Every single hand that you play with an advantage, your advantage has a chance to express itself. Now, contrast that kind of extreme form of tournament with another extreme form of tournament. Let's say there was a sit and go that only lasted one hand, right? And it only lasted that hand, and however the chip stacks were, that's how they would dole out the pay structure. I think, there we go. That's how they would dole out the payments, right? Well, you've only got one hand. I mean, even though you have a natural skill advantage on that one hand, and of course in such a tournament it wouldn't be a crapshoot in the long term, right? There'd be an actual strategy. There'd be certain hands you would enter with, and certain hands you would call given what the action is before you. So there actually would be winners and losers, but your skill advantage sometimes might not even express itself in that one hand because you just, fold or whatever, and there's no big decision. But there's only one hand for that advantage you have to express itself, and that's it. Whereas in a longer format, your advantage can express itself over and over and over, which means you can, you have more hands at which to exploit your opponent's tendencies and to profit, by doing so. So there's nothing in the payout structure per se that makes these more swingy than normal sit and goes, as people want to say. It's that it just lasts a shorter time, and your natural skill advantage just doesn't have an opportunity to express itself as easily it does in longer ones. So really what that means, the reason they're so swingy is because win rates are lower, and that's it. If it were the case that everything else being equal, if you had the same finish distribution in he could be shoving wide range. Clearly, we're going to isolate with ace queen. If you could have the same finish distribution at this format as you could at another format, and the payout structure is the same, your variance would be exactly the same, right? It would be exactly the same. So there's nothing inherently swinger in the payout structure, or it just has to do with the fact that it takes a shorter time to play, and there's just fewer hands, right? So, like, what are some... Did I register? I am registered. So sorry if this is kind of frenetic, and I hope some hands are coming through. When you make these... you make these live play videos, and I think this is actually my first live play video in Deuces Cracked ever, so I might be a little bit rusty, for which I apologize. I mean, the thing about these live play videos is no spots come up during the hour. You got to talk about other stuff, that's valuable. Now here, I mean, normally, obviously the move is to shove. Very often you can induce extra action by doing this because some guy will think you can actually fold for half your stack. But it's perfectly reasonable if you're mega tabling to just shove that. But, if you want to get cute, which is fine, you can just go ahead and make a smaller raise and see if someone will try to get you off it. Oops. So what was I saying? I don't remember. Oh, I was saying, yeah, I mean, if no spots come up, you still have to have something to talk about. So hopefully, some spots will come up. And I mean, the thing is, the decisions aren't super complex in these. That's the other thing. That's why maybe, quote, spots don't come up that are just so agonizingly, crucial, and that, or agonizingly, ambiguous. Here we are. We can certainly shove that. I mean, I am concerned because we are tied with this guy and have a lead on him, but we should have enough fold equity with that stack over that guy to make it profitable, or at least not that bad. I don't really aim for profitable. I just aim for not that bad. So hopefully, some things come up, and if they don't, at least, I'll be able to, dictate to you, this, or at least lecture to you, some things about them. So what are some adjustments, I mean, that you have to make in these? Well, I mean, in a theoretical sense, in terms of like the pay structure is exactly the same. So, you know, in a theoretical sense, there's no actual adjustments you have to make. You just have to push and fold, you know, well when the blinds are lower than, you know, when you have lower than 10 big blind stacks. You just have to, I mean, that's the skill, right? In other sit and goes, in other formats where you're deeper, you start out deeper, there are other ways of making a profit, right? I mean, the fundamental ways in which you make a profit in sit and goes overall, what is the equity buildup you get when players improperly confront one another, right? You get your equity builds up. Turn that red. It's around the bubble. I'll explain that. When players improperly confront with one another, you know, benefit at both their expense. So therefore, obviously we're going to do that. So therefore, you get equity buildup that way. You get equity buildup by just, you know, the natural hands that you're dealt, you know, because sort of natural hand selection being better than that of your opponents. And you gain equity by, you know, stealing blinds, or, you know, some combination of all those things. You know, there's, you know, sometimes when you shove, your hand is a semi-bluff, and there's a steal equity, and there's, you know, value for your hand as well. So I mean, it's not, those things can be blended, right? I mean, it's not just, it's only, I'm only shoving for a steal. I mean, sometimes, but your hand does win sometimes too. So we're gonna let that go. So, but now, of course, in these, you know, all those are present, right? But, you know, in normal sit and goes, there's also an advantage that, you know, when you're deeper, there's a normal advantage of just, you know, being able to play well on post-flop streets and things like that. And that just doesn't exist in these, right? So your only source of, we can reshove that. Your only source of profit in this is just how well you push and fold. So this rewards being able to push and fold really well. And any of these that I'm not commenting on is, you know, if you have a question about them in the forum, that's totally fine. I want to get sort of this overview out of the way. And any specific hands you can sort of, you know, bring up if I don't bring them up. So as I said, the adjustments, theoretically speaking, they're obvious. Oh, look at that. Not a problem. Theoretically speaking, there aren't any, but there are adjustments that you have to make as a result of how people play them. Right. For one thing, well, and I guess there are some sort of theoretical adjustments, and that's kind of what I'm going to go over. One of them is something I call the desperation threshold. Can we re-isolate there? Yeah, we can re-isolate there for profit, I would say. When we're playing, you know, normal sit and goes, you know, we sort of have that, we understand what is meant. I hope you understand what is meant by, we obviously have to chop there. We know what is meant by so-called desperation shove. Here, I don't know much about this player, and you can't, I'm going to shove so that he doesn't try to exploit my raise. You know, if I want to make a standard raise to just try to isolate this guy, that would be a bad idea, because he could come over the top, depending on how big my raise size was, and I would have to fold a lot of things, even though we're in the money. So I just decided to shove, even though I don't want him to call. Here, under the gun raiser, we're gonna get rid of that. All right, one hand, gone. Isn't that nice? Here, I'm gonna let it go because this guy's just about to go through, and it would be a real shame to bust out there. Sorry, as I try to, you know, there's a lot of housekeeping to do in this. I hope it's not too distracting. I mean, there's no other alternative. Because I can't use full tilt shortcuts to do all this housekeeping for me, and I wanted to do a super turbo video, so. You know, when we're very familiar with the concept of the desperation shove, and for those of you who aren't super familiar with it, where's the pot there? It's gonna be hard to fold second pair, but you very well could have a draw or a higher pair. I'm just going to let that go and push and fold well, the rest of the tournament. I'm not usually happy about folding second pair, but that kind of board with that min raise, I'm okay with it. Especially when I'm going to hit my 6. Ready? Or 3 one time. Hey, there it is. Not a problem. Desperation shove, for those of you who don't know what it is, very often in a normal sit and go, the blinds are constantly coming around, eating away at your stack, and your stack at some points can be so short that you're, I don't mind that flop, or that board, that's a good board. It can be so short that you start to lose the ability to make people fold, and the ability to make people fold is like a huge source of profit in these, right? Or just in sit and goes in general, I mean. So it's worth, throwing your stack in, trying to take one last shot at the blinds with a trash hand in early position when the blinds are about to hit you, to just preserve your fold equity, right? And the generally sort of accepted practice for that is 5 blinds. If the blinds are going to come around and knock your hand significantly, knock your stack significantly below 5 blinds, then you want to start to think, well, boy, maybe I should desperation shove as I avoid a situation just like that. But I'll explain why, which is what I'm doing. Now, when does that happen? If we think about when that actually happens in the span of a normal sit and go, right? Like a normal deep stacked, 1500 chip sit and go, we're generally making desperation shoves when, we've taken a hit to our stack, and all of a sudden our stack is significantly below those of our opponents, right? And, for some reason we've lost chips, right? There's a guy with half a stack, and we get into an all-in confrontation and lose, and we're left with, half of our own stack left, right? And then of course the blinds go up, and then all of a sudden we've got 4.5 blinds, or 5 blinds. We have to start thinking about making a desperation shove. So that's sort of your desperation threshold, I guess. I mean, I always like to come up with terminology for things. Your desperation threshold in that kind of scenario is like 5 blinds, right? If the blinds are threatening, the impending blinds are threatening to knock your stack below 5 blinds, then you have to start thinking about desperation. Now, desperation threshold in these, to play these successfully, I think that you very often have to be willing to go through the blinds even when it's going to knock your stack below 5 blinds significantly. And so I kind of lower the desperation threshold. This is not, we could re-raise this to isolate and hopefully knock him out and therefore take a flip. Unfortunately, we have to put in another 140 chips to do it, and there are situations where I do that, but the stacks weren't quite set up for that. So I think that the desperation threshold in these has to go down. That you should really think about your desperation threshold not being 5 blinds, but more like 3 to 3.5 big blinds, right? You still have fold equity when you have 3.5 to 3 blinds, right? But why is that? Well, the reason I think that is because, for one thing, the stacks, we're second lowest stack, we're about to take on the blinds, king 8 and the cutoff. Even if it's negative ICM wise, I think it's worth it to do it in the long run. Let me register for another one here. Uh, 145, we're getting 2 to 1. This is another thing I have to talk about. We are getting 2 to 1 on a call, but it's so much of our stack to call, like of our equity, that I think it's better off to fold and wait. The threshold comes down because, as I mentioned, in that scenario where we're used to desperation shoving, it's because our stack has taken a hit, right? We've lost chips, and now we find ourselves with a chip stack that is significantly below that of our opponents. And if you remember from my previous videos, when your stack is well behind those of your opponents, what does that mean? Well, that means that your equity is diminished, right? Your equity is a lot lower than the average equity in the tournament. And, and so therefore, by shoving, see, when your stack doesn't represent a lot of equity in the tournament, it doesn't hurt you to lose it, right? It doesn't, even though it's your, quote, tournament life, you don't have a lot, right? So it doesn't hurt to risk something that isn't worth much, right? So therefore you're more justified in shoving it all in. So what happens in these, however, is that you hit that kind of, 5 big blind area when everyone can have roughly the same stack, or when you're not that in that bad a shape, right? So I mean, very easily, we could all kind of keep around our same. Turn that red, and I'll explain that again why later. Here I am going to shove that. I'm so desperately far behind everybody else. I have fold equity and a robust hand. I think that's worth a shove. Even if it's negative in Sit and Go Wizard, I'm happy to shove it just because of sort of non-ICM effects. And I don't know if I won that. Did I? Oh, that's nice. So sorry I have to keep coming back to things. But so as I was saying, we're used to coming across that situation when our stack has been diminished, in larger stack kind of format Sit and Goes, our equity has been diminished, and therefore it doesn't hurt us to lose it. But in these, you're going to come across that, 5 big blind situation, and the blinds are coming up. You're going to come across it, when stacks are all relatively near each other, when your equity is not that diminished. Here, I think this is really close. We do have a lead on a guy. There's no timer here. I'm going to fold this. If it were like ace queen suited, I'd call. He could be on a very wide range, and he should be on a wide range. This could be kind of close either way, but I'm going to fold it just because we have a lead on a guy and we have the ability to shove in future hands. If you want to say that that's a mistake, I just don't know a ton about how he's playing on this, on the bubble here. Here we need to tile. All right, let me turn that stainless, and we'll say we're ready. So what happens in these is you reach that 5 big blind situation where the blinds are coming up, and it's an illusion that you're desperate because your equity in the tournament isn't as diminished as it is when you face that situation in a deep stack format. So very often what happens is people in these, what I notice in the hands I've seen from other people and myself, is people will desperation shove too widely. They're like, oh my god, I'm going to be under 5 blinds. I don't want to take on the blinds. It's 8-handed, and everyone's got their original stack. And you think, well, I've got a desperation shove. No, I think, as I said, I think the desperation threshold, because your equity is higher than you think it is, because the stacks aren't as skewed as they would be in that other format, you have more equity than you think, and therefore it's not as worth risking it. Obviously, we can't call here because we have that, that kind of lead on that guy, and that just wouldn't be a good thing. Too much to risk. Now we should figure to have fold equity over this guy. I think he'll fold a lot of hands. He's not calling just to eliminate us, hopefully. He's got fairly tight stats for that level. Here, 10-5, somewhat looser stats, but he does have a lead on a guy, so it's possible he could be more risk averse and therefore fold, but we'll see how that works out. I don't think any decision is wrong as long as you justify it. And, but anyway. So your equity is not as bad as you think it is when you have to make that desperation shove. Therefore, the price you're paying for making that shove is too dear, right? It's too expensive. You're risking too much in an analogous situation. So I think, since you do have fold equity at 3 and 3.5 blinds, you can go through the blinds. Even if the blinds are going to knock you down to around that threshold. Right? And there's sort of another reason, too, that has to do... I'm going to turn this green. There's sort of another threshold, and he could have a lot of hands there, and we're behind everybody else with a robust hand and decent price, so I think that's fine. Probably most likely going to show up with an ace, but we'll see. Oh, I didn't mean to only do that, so... Somehow, yeah, he's got an ace. Oh, that's not... Come on. That's a good flop. That's a good board for us. The other reason is there's a lot more volatility in the way players handle their stacks in these things. So very often, because the stacks are shorter, right? People are in that push-fold mode earlier. And, potential bust-outs happen every single hand. So it's not uncommon to see, 5 bust-outs within the span of one orbit. So especially if your table is long-handed, you can go through the blinds expecting that. Let's see, we have to put into, we probably have to do that. I don't like it, but here, this one can be red. You can go through the blinds, knocking yourself down to 3.5 blinds, expecting that very possibly 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 players might go out on this orbit, and all of a sudden, you've gained a lot of equity just from players busting themselves out. And not to mention, since, especially if it's long-handed, right? So you have the equity build up from players potentially busting. So, the first one I talked about were about your equity being more, the price being too high. That was sort of an ICM consideration. And this is sort of one of those, famous non-ICM considerations, the future hand, future play considerations, right? That's the second one I'm talking about. Several players are apt to bust out within the span of one orbit. So, in addition to that, though, is especially if it's long-handed, you have several opportunities to also pick up some kind of, reasonable hand that you can shove for value. So it's sort of that possibility combined with the equity buildup that you potentially get by players busting themselves out in, is sort of par for the course in these things, that makes it that, again, your desperation threshold is lower because you have the potential. What is that? I don't know what. Did he limp in and I didn't shove because I was talking? That's all right. I'll just fold. We're green here. This guy's doing that. I don't know what he's doing that with. I've timed out of that one. I get much more interested in talking than I do in playing. So again, the combined chances that you pick up a hand and that several players bust themselves out means that you're not as desperate as you think you are, kind of from a long-term, like non-immediate ICM perspective, right? So therefore, I think desperation threshold in these things has to go down. Therefore, you should not be shoving as widely when the blinds are coming around with corresponding stacks. 5 big blind stack. If you don't have anything and it's fairly long-handed and you don't have fold equity, feel free to go through the blinds. And this, I'm just not gonna, I'm not gonna accept that. No, I should probably replace this one. So I hope you don't mind that there's no really super interesting spots, but I hope I'm giving you enough information to make this video worth it. I think like one of the keys to winning these things very often is going to be this. I'm gonna let that one go. I'm busting out these first though. I'll take that. Here 165, 115 getting 2 to 1 basically. It is a significant portion of our stack, but our hand is pretty good, so I'm gonna go with it. And he could be shoving a wide range with his stack as well, so I think it's perfectly fine to call that, given those considerations, and obviously it was, because I won. So one of the questions that I kind of constantly asking myself when I'm playing these, and here I just don't fold ace king in this. Again, unless I know something about that guy. Certainly not on the first hand, though. I'm not going to fold ace king. And if that means I lose on the first hand, that's okay. Because you can't get too caught up in any one decision of these things, because you have to play tons of them in order to, I mean, this is if anything, if anything, these super turbos are a volume business, right? So you just can't get caught up in, oh, I lost in the first hand, so what? Just open another one. You should be playing 50 an hour. Who cares what happened in one? Not that you should be playing 50 an hour, but you can. So yeah, as I wanted to say, one of the questions that I'm constantly think is important to ask myself in these is, do I have fold equity? And if not, does it matter? Does it matter? Not doesn't, but does it matter that I have no fold equity? What do I mean by that? The first question you should ask when you are in a situation where you might potentially think about shoving, where it's open folded to you, and you're trying to decide, all right, what should I do here? You have to ask yourself, well, do I have the ability to make people fold? And if you do, and I don't mean the ability to just make, someone fold once in a while. I mean, do I have a significant fold equity that it should play as a factor in my decision? Is there significant value from the ability of people to fold that, you showed me eights there, limps with eights. Congratulations. Is there a significant value in my ability to make people fold to make this, worthy of this hand, worthy of consideration as a potential shove? And if there's not, there are some times when it doesn't matter that you have fold equity. If you remember those like 4 factors I always harp on in every single video, fold equity, hand strength, risk, and reward. If you don't have fold equity, there are some times when it doesn't matter if you have fold equity, right? Like if there's a significant risk reward context where there's just so much money in the pot that you're willing to put up your stack against somebody else's stack just because of the overlay. And here we're going to shove any ace. Just because of the overlay, so that means even if you don't have fold equity, there's a significant overlay, and therefore it can very often be correct to shove. But there are times when certain hands are very dependent on fold equity, right? So much so that if you don't have fold equity, if you don't have anything else going for the hand to make it a shove, then you shouldn't shove. And there are some examples of this. God, I'm just rocking the firsts. I am so okay with that. That if you don't have fold equity and you have no other kind of overbearing or sort of overarching reason that sort of trumps fold equity to shove, then you shouldn't shove. And there are some times when that comes up. So far, not in this set, but in it may come up. Don't know. Here, we'll register for that one. Are we 5? We're still 5-handed. Here we're 4-handed, and we have to shove. Here, we'll close that out. You have to. So, for example, sometimes in the maybe this was an example I should have used for that, but that's okay. I knew I was going to win. But our hand was too strong to not shove. So very often, if you can't make people fold, and the risk-reward context isn't such that it doesn't matter if you can't make people fold, then you probably shouldn't be shoving. Here, there's no small blind, but I think, we can do it anyway. Why not? Aggression owns, as they say. So that's just a question I'm constantly asking myself is, do I have fold equity, and does it matter? All right, and hopefully the answers to those questions are going to lead me toward, a way of thinking about any given hand that I, sort of focuses me on the correct factors to think about. If you don't have fold equity and you don't have any of the other factors for sure, let's see, he could be shoving a wide range here. I did play him heads up, and he did have aggressive stats there. It's kind of bubbly, but I'm one of the lower stacks, so I'm not risking that much by calling. And here we're obviously doing that. And what can I say? I'm running well. I need to run well, don't I? Well, that's running well too, isn't it? Anyway, that's a question I'm constantly asking myself. Do I have fold equity, and does it even matter if I have fold equity? And that's a bubble. Oh, I should have taken time to explain why I'm changing the colors here. Generally speaking, when I'm playing these, I'm not tiling them. I am stacking them. Putting one like right on top of the other, like that. And not even one. I'm putting 16 right on top of each other. And as the tables pop, you make decisions. That one goes to the background, and another one pops. I think it's really the only way to play these. You could cascade them, but tiling these for 16 tables is, I think, is impossible because they just go so fast. And the other thing is you don't have a timer, right? So, and the decisions come so fast and so furious when you're 16 table, especially if like you're in 16 of them and you happen to be running particularly well. and you haven't busted out on any of them, and they're all 6, 5, and 4-handed, so the hands are coming around like, all the time. If you have, oh, not a problem. Um, if you have to continually ask yourself, am I on the bubble? Because each table looks the same. Sometimes, with your HUD and and the Holdem Manager cards like these. Let's see, 320. He could be shoving a wide range. There's probably enough in the pot for me to call this. Let's do it. I'm running well, so I can do what I want, right? Not a problem. Yeah, when you're running well, by the way, that's one lesson. You can just do whatever you want and not care. What was I saying? Let me open another one up while I try to remember what I'm saying. That one goes down. I'm not going to shove just bear queen high. Oh yeah, why I do this. So the tables are popping, you've got all this stuff on the screen. Sometimes it can be hard to notice, well, am I 4-handed? Am I 3-handed? Am I 5-handed? It's hard to know. But the decisions are coming so fast that you need some way to sort of kind of instantly tell you that context. Like, I'm on the bubble. Like, as soon as the table pops. So what I do is anytime the table is 5-handed or more, 5 to 9-handed, I will, let's see. This is pretty marginal. I mean, he's shoving over 10 blinds, so I think that indicates a stronger than normal range. And that, you might get on me for that fold, but, well, all right. Congratulations. But I think that's probably at the very bottom of what he was shoving. Here, Ace-Jack is not a shove. I could also got to give you preliminary push-fold ranges for various positions, too, before this video's out. But I wanted to get into more theoretical matters because I like those better. So what I do is when it's 5-handed, I keep it one color. In this case, I keep it stainless steel, right? The silver. And that's what's great about full tilt is you can easily change, the background like with a click. And in fact, I have a AHK script that someone was nice enough to build for me that I can just press a button and it instantly changes the background to whatever I want it to be. So 5-handed or more, it's stainless steel, and that indicates to me that its play is still relatively normal. Yada yada. When it gets to be the bubble, things are different. There's a different dynamic on the bubble that you have to sort of play with and respect. So I like to know that. So if by turning it red, as soon as the table pops, I don't have to look around the table. Am I 4-handed? Am I 5-handed? I can't really tell. I got to act, and I got 6 tables, beeping behind me. I don't know what to do. Let me just act and blah blah blah. I think there's an opportunity to really, make some poor decisions. But if the table instantly pops and it's red, it's the bubble, and you can act accordingly with your stack without having to take that extra beat to figure out, oh yeah, it's the bubble, right? So similarly, so I chose red because for those of you who are Americans, who watch football, NFL football, what is the red zone, right? The red zone is when you're close to the end zone, right? When you're close to a score. So when they're close to a score, they call that the red zone, and so I chose to make it red because I'm close to a score, right? And so when it's green, so when it's 3-handed, I turn it green because green means I'm in the money, right? So instantly I know I have to switch to my 3-handed and heads-up way of looking at that table, and I get that instantly, right? And I didn't win that, but I didn't have to. I'll take a second. It's kind of disappointing after all these firsts I've been doing, but what can you do? Let me open up another one here. And I'll stop opening them around an hour, and I'll let those other ones play out. I'll let them all play out after an hour or so. As long as I continue to have something to talk about. I mean, again, no interesting pots have really come up, which is kind of typical of these. There's not a lot of close decisions. Well, there's close decisions, but there's nothing that's like, all of a sudden you're on the river and a couple bets went in, and the decisions aren't complex. They're just, you have to get them right. So anyway, I have that context instantly, presented to me by means of a color, and it's immediate impact, right? And the green is because I'm in the money, and the red is because it's the red zone, like in football, right? And so now this may not be valuable when you're four-tabling tiling like that, but it's very valuable when you've got table after table after table, popping after popping. When you have to make these decisions, it's one less thing you have to do. And we're not going to get involved here with that kind of raise. Very often people will do that with a premium hand looking to entice people. I'm not saying that's what it is, but it happens. So that's sort of why I changed the table colors, because it just it seems to work for me. As far as like opening ranges, what would I open with? Well, I wouldn't really change my ranges very much from what my normal open raising ranges would be in a normal deep sit and go, right? In the first couple positions, I would shove 10s plus. I would, here, I'm not going to shove that. I would shove 10s plus, and I would shove ace king and maybe ace queen suited if I kind of wanted to, but I usually don't. So that's in the first two positions, and then as positions open up, in middle position, I'm looking at adding in ace queen. I'm looking at adding in pocket 9s and 8s, and in late position, not on the bubble, and this is assuming 10 blinds, right? Assuming it's like the first hand of the game. I mean, this is kind of what I'm talking about. And obviously you have to adjust that for for your chip stack and stuff like that, and that's where the real trick of these comes in. And look at, we're up a little bit, I guess. Oh, whoops, I didn't really want to get my email address on there, so hopefully we can get Rusty to block that out. Because I've already had trouble with people getting a hold of, I've already had security issues. I don't need any more. So hopefully I can get Rusty to block that out. So, opening ranges, first hand, right? Middle position, I'm looking at adding an ace queen, pocket 9s, pocket 8s, and then late position, my king queen, my ace 10, maybe ace 9 suited on the button, or you can go a little bit looser on the button. And then pocket 6s or something like that, pocket 5s, even if you wanted to on the button, wouldn't really be all that terrible. So something like that. Very similar guidelines as I gave, opening guidelines in the Grinder series to Velo Blank, like that sort of basic set of ranges, right, for a beginner, what they should open, right? That's sort of what I recommend as sort of my open shoving ranges in these things. And of course, you have to adjust that once the blinds rise and so forth. You have to get progressively looser. I don't generally loosen up too much at a full-handed table when I'm in an early position, but you can do that as you start to, get later position. Here, this guy is kind of Olympia McLimperson, a 54-8, and I think I can shove that for profit. There's enough money in the middle, and if I can get these guys to fold, I'm willing to put up my 195 against whatever he has. Unfortunately, I get called in two spots, which kind of blows. But the other thing is shoving from the small. One question I get about these is shoving from the small blind on the first hand. Should you shove any two? It's 10 blinds. You are one time, not today. Should you shove any two from the small blind on the first hand because it's 10 blinds? You're as far away from the equity ceiling as you can possibly be, if you remember the concept of equity ceilings, or at least the bias against confrontation is the lowest. To use AMT's term, is going to be the lowest. In the first hand, when there's 9 people there, that's when the ICM tax is the lowest, right? The closer you get to the bubble, the worse it is. So the ICM tax is the lowest. The here we're getting better than 2-to-1 for a trivial portion of our stack that's not going to affect our tournament situation. Good pot odds, so I'm fine with that. And we're registered in that, so we're okay. So should I shove small blind, big blind? No, because I think on the first level, on the first hand or whatever, the first couple of hands, the the sort of at least as the games are, late July 2000 whatever, I think he should be shoving wide enough that the calling with 7s is profitable. Whether he is, I don't know, because I don't really know, but it's good enough. I'm running bad. The bust out factor, I mean, in a vacuum, right? Like if you knew you had a tight opponent in a vacuum, I would say yes, go ahead and open shove the small blind in the first hand. But we don't play hands in a vacuum, right? And we don't always know who the guy is to our left on the first hand. And the implosion factor is really high on the first hand. I mean, sometimes the first hand will go and 3 guys will get eliminated, you know. Guy will quadruple up. So because if you know something about it, it's a regular and you know you can get away with it, you can, you know, in a theoretical sense in a vacuum. But if you just realize that you don't play these in a vacuum, that even if it's a tight regular, if he's paying attention, he's going to sort of see what you're doing and adjust properly, you know. As long as you recognize there is no vacuum, then go ahead and shove the first hand. But I almost never just shove a trash hand in the small blind just because it's folded to me. I'll shove any kind of sort of robust looking playable hand on the first hand, you know. If it's folded to me and I don't know anything about the player, I'll shove a hand like Jack 9 of hearts. I'll shove any pocket pair. I'll shove any ace. You know, I will shove like medium suited kings and king 9 offsuit, stuff like that. Am I out of this one? I guess so. Oops. You know, queen, jack, you know, robust hands that aren't trash, right? So maybe that's the top 35 to 40% of hands against a random. If it's somebody that I know, then I'm going to act accordingly. But you can't just say, well, it's the first hand, I'm going to open shove. The other thing that is important in these is to know how to shove from the cutoff and the hijack in terms of what your table will allow. And I wanted to sort of get used to these, so I played about, you know, because I didn't have any experience with these and I just wanted to see what happened. So I played a lot of like the lowest stakes of these, which I think are $3.80. I played about 1,500 of these, like, you know, 50 at a time. It didn't really take me all that long. It was just in a few weeks. And it's interesting, the lower in stakes you go, and this kind of follows the general trend of like how poker has gone, you know, ever since the information explosion that's happened around poker. You know, before there was tons of information, what were the lower stakes like? Well, the lower stakes were like you'd imagine play money would be like. It was almost exactly the same. People were just wild and crazy because, you know, any two will do and any hand can win and I want to gamble and whatever. But as the information explosion happened, especially in like lower stakes cash games, like medium stake cash games, the default player was very, very tight because that's like what you hear. When you hear, you know, poker strategy for the first time, it's, you know, tight is right. So the lower stakes players are always like a couple of years, you know, behind the higher stakes players in terms of, you know, what they think about poker strategy and how they should play. Here we're so far behind everybody else. We've still got fold equity. Going through the blinds would knock us down below 3, so we're going to shove queen 5. So, and that is actually what I found. What this is all coming to is I found that the lower stakes players tended to be tighter than like these kind of lower middle stakes, like the 15s and the 30s, the 28 plus 2s. I found that they were tighter at the lower stakes, so I could shove more widely from the cutoff and the hijack, right? So you really have to sort of understand, like, depending on what here's an example, right, where you might be tempted to desperation shove, but I have a lead on a player, I'm close to another one, I can take on the blind and get a few more hands, and maybe some people will bust themselves out. All right, it's 4 blinds. It's going to knock me to 3 or so, but I'm okay with that. So you have to sort of get like a sense of what your stakes will allow you to do, and you have to do it, right? I'm not really in the habit of giving up an edge if I have it, right? So in these lower stakes games, the 380s and the 750? Is that what they are? I found that you could shove really, really widely from the cutoff and the hijack. So here, and it's not quite good enough. Well, he wasn't even shoving anyway, so. You can shove really widely from the cutoff and the hijack. And so, but you can't get away with it as much at the 14s, where they seem to like want to make, hero calls against you. At the early stakes, they're just trying to, hold on for dear life. But here, they're trying to make hero calls and, get a sense of what your range is, and they don't quite understand risk-reward context, so they make calls that they shouldn't, and so forth. And wow, I'm in last place. So, but anyway, it's really important to work out, and I think this is actually true of all types of sit and goes, is to work out how widely you can shove from the hijack and the cutoff, because depending on what your opponents are willing to do, here we don't really have fold equity a lot. We might have a little bit, but there's so much money in the pot that I'm willing to put in my amount versus whatever anyone wants to call. And look at that, we're slightly ahead. And we'll just open a few more, and that will be it. Where's the thing? Here it is. And we obviously have to shove a pair here for 2.5 blinds. And, our last hinge of fold equity plus, risk-reward context. Plus a good hand, if we're called. Obvious shove there. So that's what if you wanted to work on something in sit and go wizard to figure out what you're, what you should be doing, that's what I would look at. Am I missing shoves in the cutoff and hijack, or am I shoving too widely, or what? I kind of had one other thing that I might have thought to go over, and I'm trying to think if I have time. Yeah, I guess I have time. I mean, what the hell? I've made 2-hour videos before, right? So I'm just going to offer this without much explanation, and if you want explanation of how I came up with it, then that's fine, but I think it's like a useful guideline that I sort of use. And that's like, what pair should I shove from which position for how many blinds? Right? I have pocket twos. One of the big mistakes people is they shove way too, just in general in sit and goes, they shove way too widely with pocket pairs from like early middle position, right? So I try to come up with a way to figure out, well, is there like a mathematical or like shortcut that I can come up with to explain, or at least to estimate, these long-handed shoves, like when the table is like 7 or 8 or 9-handed, and I've got a pocket pair from a certain position with a certain stack size. I have no reason to expect that he's super wide. He's in one of the earlier positions. He's attacking a player that has sort of a similar stack to him, so I would expect he has value, which I think Ace-10 is probably not very good. Ace-Queen, I would certainly come over the top. Ace-Jack, maybe. Could be a mistake. You can check on it. That's fine. So I try to come up with a way to estimate that and to sort of come with like a rule of thumb. And the assumptions here are that if you are on a table that's 7 to 9 or 10-handed, depending on the game, and you're, so that means you're far away. Why is that important? Well, that's because you're far away from the money, right? So the bubble doesn't have as big an effect on things. Excuse me, I had to rattle my itchy ear, so I had to rattle my microphone. The bubble doesn't have as big an effect on things, right? The ICM tax is as low as it's going to be. So the hand values don't get skewed as much, if you remember that from my last episode of the Grinder series. If you are, let me try to get into a few more. My method of estimating what hands you can shove from what position is this, right? You take the number of spots you are away from the big blind and count yourself, right? So let me just open a few more here before I go, just so I have something to look at while I talk. So here we go. Here we're on a bubble, so we're going to turn that red. We are last in chips, far behind everyone else. We have fold equity. That's a middle stack that we can attack. I think King 8 is going to be, even if Sit and Go Wizard says it's wrong, it's one I would make because I think there's non-ICM stuff that comes around. The blinds are coming around. We already have, 3.5 blinds, so our fold equity is going to go away, and we get to attack a guy who has a vulnerable stack. So I think that's perfectly fine, even if Wizard says no. Here, I just shoved. I'm going to go through the blinds. I have to attack one of the larger stacks. I'll leave the middle stack. It's close, but I don't want to stop him if he wants to shove. Right? I'm willing to take a blind and see what happens. So I'm sorry I keep getting interrupted, but I guess I got to talk about the hands when they happen. So what I do is like I figure out I figure out a number, right? I take, like, say, for example, here the number would be 5, right? I'm basically, including me, there's 5 players left, in the hand. Right? So there's these 4 players and me, that's 5, right? Up to the big blind. And then I take that number and I multiply it by the number of big blinds I have, right? So in this case, I have 10 blinds, and here's, so what to do here? I'm significantly below everyone else. Again, I get to attack another stack. Unfortunately, he's getting really good odds to call me, but he might not. And I have a robust hand, and I don't want to take on the blind. So again, even if Wiz says it's negative, there are desperation shoves on the bubble, believe it or not, where you should take negative EV chances. And that's good. I'll take that. That's fine. Let's go for it. Come on. Come on. No, that's not going to happen. You can whiz that or not, but I think that's one I would do just because of non-ICM factors. Maybe I'll let these run out because it is 66 minutes and I want to talk about this. So again, if you're 5 spots away from the big blind, including you, so there's 4 people you have to get through, including you, you multiply that by the number of blinds you have, or at least effective blinds. And there you'll get a number, right? So say I have 7 blinds and I'm 5 spots away, that number would be 35. Well, then what you do is and this also assumes that you're willing to take any edge, right? And this is also a rough approximation, right, to get you in the ballpark of what's right. So you take that number 35, and then you kind of think of pocket pairs as hands that are a number, right? So pocket 8s, what would its number be? 88. Pocket 9s, 99. Pocket 6s, 66. So you can shove any pocket pair whose number is larger than that number that you calculated, right? And that's, again, assuming you when sit and go wizard when there's that 0 edge, right? And you're willing to take any edge. That's what I'm looking at. If you put an edge in, it's going to restrict the hands that you're correct to shove. And this is assuming typical opponents that you don't know anything about. There's not like a super loose guy after you. This is just like unknowns or normal kind of non-crazy insane players, right? And if you're not sure, it's a good thing to default to. You take that number, so if you were 4 spots away, and again, this is when I have to keep qualifying it because it works in a certain context. And the context is when you're far away from the money, it's a long-handed table, by which I mean 7 or more players remaining, and you have a pocket pair and you have shovable stacks, all right? You just multiply your number of big blinds by the, no, it's not. By the number of big blinds by the number of spots you are away from the big blind, including yourself. So, for example, in this hand, it doesn't quite work from the button. I'm still working on it. But it kind of does. So in this, here would be 3 because I'm 2 spots away. And I have, let's see, where am I? Oh, there's the button. Is there one more table hidden here? No, there's not. Here I've got a significant lead on 3 other players, well over 10 big blinds. This guy's shoving with fairly, nitty stats. I don't need to call with ace jack. It's too much risk because of for too little reward, and I just don't know what he has in terms of range, and his range indicates a pretty decent range. And this, it's much different to be the opener than it is the caller. So I'm going to shove that and just hope everyone folds. Particularly where his stats are, fairly reasonable stats, and he's got to put me on some kind of hand here. So anyway, that's the thing I use. So if you're 5 spots away with a 5 big blind stack, 5 times 5 is 25. So I would shove. You're able to, if you're willing to take any edge, hands that are roughly 3s or maybe 4s or something like that, but not pocket deuces, right? Anyway, it's sort of something rough I'm coming up with. It's sort of based on the Sklansky-Chubukov numbers. And I have And again, if you came up with a counterexample to it where Wizard says it's clearly wrong, I wouldn't be all that surprised. But it's also kind of based not on the Wizard ranges. Like the way that Wizard handles ranges is a little weird because you don't get to choose what hands people call with. You know, you're just restricted to that slider and whatever it says. You can't pick and choose hands. So I think there's a little bit of a distortion in there. Here, Queen Jack with these stacks here, reasonable stacks. I think you can go ahead and shove Queen Jack, especially if you lose, you're still in it. So the risk is, you know, less than if you only had this amount. But then again, if you only had their amount, you'd have less equity. So obviously we're going to shove that. Even though this is, and here's the thing. The other thing I want to say about these is, all right, just putting that other like pocket pair thing aside. I mean, it's somewhat controversial. And again, if you came up with a counterexample, I wouldn't be all that surprised, but I'd probably be able to explain it away. Yeah, the other thing is here, you can't be afraid to shove, especially if you're massively multi-tabling. And look at, we're like way down, which sucks. But that's okay. I mean, there's a lot of volatility. Well, not necessarily way down because we're in $45 worth of tournaments. So, but you know, 23 blinds. So you can't be afraid to over shove, like to shove 10, 15 blinds. It's better than like screwing up or causing yourself to make a bad, to get in over your head with the number of decisions you have to make and time out on a bunch of tables. It's perfectly fine to shove 10 blinds, 12 blinds, 15 blinds. It's really not a problem. Here we should be able to exploit bubble aversion, even though we're shoving a large number of blinds at them. You know, this guy's in the small blind and less apt to call us, and this guy doesn't want to bust out before him. And unfortunately, he does call us, and we have to show this down. And also, but you know, we're still in it with a healthy stack. Here, we don't really have fold equity. He's probably going to call us. He's a loose player, but what we can do is manufacture fold equity by doing a limp steal. And he does go. Let's see what he does. Please don't shove on me. Hey, that was awesome. Look at that. And here we hit gin. And my plan was just to limp in the flop and bet any flop. I think that's perfectly fine once you get to that blind level because he's not folding pre-flop, so you can manufacture fold equity. So here, let's see. He's a reg. I don't expect him to, or at least he has a chip, which is turn that chip off if you have it. So I got to expect that if he's multi-tabling, then he's just going to fold any trash hand he has, and so that sort of gives me license to go ahead and make a raise. He's just going to overshove like that, which is fine if he wants to play it that way. We'll fold that. So yeah, don't be afraid to overshove if it simplifies your decision making such that you can then go on and play with the tables. I mean, it's really sucks to make like a 3x raise and then have to play like 3 streets and check and blah blah blah, all while you're trying to manage like 17 other decisions. It just blows. So there's nothing wrong with overshoving like that. And the other thing is, you know, just because it's shove mode most of the tournament, this is rough. I'm not exactly sure what he'd be shoving here. It is a 15 blind raise, and generally when a guy is shoving that many blinds, it does restrict his range, and like an ace is a very large portion of that range, and I can't put up my 880 against his 880 with only a 90 chip overlay with a king against an ace, so I'm going to fold that. And I'm going to play small ball here and just see which is what I'm trying to say here is if just because it's shove mode through, that's not bad. And we'll just make a raise that should be small enough but still builds the pot, and then I would make a continuation bet, kind of that with very little. When you get to heads up, sometimes you're going to have 15 to 20 blinds, so don't think you have to be in shove mode the whole time. This guy's good. You don't have to be in shove mode just because the early part of the game was shove fold. Very often you'll get to here, and if you're a good heads up player, if you play sit and goes and heads up sit and goes, use what you know about playing heads up sit and goes. You know, make small raises and try to steal blinds and small ball him and all that. Here, I don't think I want to call off. I mean, I have so little equity compared to everybody else that it wouldn't be the biggest mistake in the world to do it, because I'm just not risking much by doing it. On the other hand, it's probably not. Well, of course, I also knew that I was going to get 7s in next hand, but it's probably not. And here, I just think I'm so low compared to everybody else that even though this raise puts him on somewhat of a range that can stand action against these players, I think 7s are too good, combined with how low my equity is. I don't have any fold equity, but with bad equity in pocket 7s, I think that's going to be good enough. And if I lose and I'm wrong, oh well. See, this is a very exploitable raise that he made, and he took advantage of that. And he had to fold almost any, a lot of hands. Not almost any hand, but a lot of hands. And unfortunately, I can't dodge the ace. So anyway, not a ton of interesting spots, but obviously some stuff to talk about. Considering this is the first Super Turbo video on Deuces Crack that we have. So hopefully at least there was enough in there to give you a sense of like what you should be doing, what kind of things you should be thinking about, and why, and just in general, how to play these things, what plays look normal, the kind of things you should be thinking about. Oh, the other thing is bankroll. Since these are going to, there is going to be higher variance because of, you have lower win rates, you are obviously going to need a higher bankroll. And I would say whatever bankroll you would think you would need at whatever level you're playing, I would pretty much double it, because there are some pretty bad swings at these because of win rates, right? Again, it's not inherent in the sit and go. It's a function of your win rate, and you might not expect your win rate to be as low as it is compared to if you're playing similar stakes at deeper stack sit and go. So I would take whatever your normal bankroll advice would be and like double it, maybe 1.5 times it, something like that. So anyway, that was this video. I think 76 minutes is long enough. And if you have any questions, comments, complaints, or anything like that, then feel free to air them in the forum. But for now, thanks for watching.